Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being with us. Special welcome to everyone who's in the room with us in Rome, as well as those who are joining us through the live stream. Great to have you with us for our briefing, where we'll be talking about the Inuit delegation that met with Pope Francis earlier today. And we'll follow a similar process for our previous briefing with the Métis delegation, where we'll have some brief remarks from each of our guests on the stage, and then we will have a brief period of Q&A. So to introduce the speakers that you'll be hearing from this afternoon, first we have President Natan Obed, who is the president of the Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami. Next to President Obed is Martha Gregg, who's a member of the Inuit delegation. Next to Martha, we have Archbishop Richard Gagnon, who's the Archbishop of Winnipeg, and briefly introduced the delegation this morning at the meeting. And next to Archbishop Gagnon, we have Bishop William McGrattan, who is the Vice President of the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops. Welcome to all our speakers, and with that, I'll hand things over to President Obed.
Thank you. We had our hour-long encounter with the Pope this morning at 11 a.m. We have a delegation of 8 that went to the palace to have our conversation or our encounter. For Inuit, we had 2 parts of the delegation. One was the part that I was convening, which was on behalf of Canadian Inuit leadership. And there were a number of positions that Canadian Inuit wanted me to bring forward today on behalf of land claim regions and on behalf of Inuit leadership. And then there were a number of individuals who came with their own perspectives and wanted to convey their own personal messages from their Inuit communities to the Pope. So we had a diversity of conversation. The Pope was welcoming and very thoughtful and very engaged throughout the entire encounter. And we were very pleased with the way in which the meeting unfolded. In relation to the content of the meeting, there were a number of conversations about faith and about the ongoing presence of the Catholic Church in Inuit Nunangat. There was a lot of conversation about residential schools and the negative impacts of residential schools on Inuit and the intergenerational trauma aspect of residential schools. There were also positive conversations about the role that the Catholic Church can play in reconciliation and also in Inuit communities moving forward. For the national Inuit positions, there really were 3 primary concerns that we brought forward. The first was in relation to an apology, and we invited the Pope to Inuit Nunangat as a part of the larger call to action 58 from the TRC, which calls for the Pope to come to Canada to apologize to Indigenous peoples in relation to the role that the Catholic Church played in residential schools. The Pope was kind enough to say how much he wished that will come to pass. We look forward to further conversations with the Catholic Church about whether or not that is an opportunity in the near future. We then also talked about the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement from 2006 and the outstanding concerns that Inuit have about the Catholic Church's implementation of that particular settlement agreement and the gap in compliance on certain issues by the Catholic Church, especially considering the outstanding $25 million restitution, which of only which $3 million has been paid. We recognize that the Catholic Church has a fundraising campaign in relation to this particular part of the residential school settlement agreement, but we would like to see more immediate action. We also, in relation to TRC and in relation to the ongoing work on reconciliation, ask that the Catholic Church work with us in partnership on the emerging challenge and the heartbreaking challenge of Indigenous children that are being found on residential school properties in unmarked graves. And this was not necessarily in relation to one thing. It's not just records. It's not just compliance to TRC or to the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement. It's also the good faith to use the Catholic Church's resources to help in any way that, that they can possibly help, to ensure that we find closure and we find I guess the shared path forward, which recognizes the gross human rights abuses that have taken place, but also the way in which we can move beyond that moment and work together in partnership, and not just through legal binding agreements. The final point that we raised was in relation to the legacy of sexual abuse in the church, and asked the Pope directly if he would intervene in a particular case against Johannes Revoir, who currently resides in France. And we asked that the Pope speak with Father Revoir directly and ask him to go to Canada to face the charges that he is up on in Canada. And if Father Revoir is not agreeable to that, if the Pope would do all that he could to work with the French government to ensure that either extradition can happen or that Father Revoir can be tried in France. We want this new relationship and this relationship of reconciliation to be based on action, and also based on mutual shared ambition. And it is such a heartbreaking reality that some people who should have been brought to justice decades ago have not seen justice, and those who have been abused and those victims have sometimes died before they have seen justice. What happened in residential school, as far as the policies surrounding residential school, are history. A lot of what has happened in residential school happened with people who are no longer alive, but that is not always the case, and there are still things that we can do together to ensure that there is justice for those who do not have it yet. With all those heavy things, there was also a true sense of openness and kindness that was showed to us as a delegation. And so I do want to thank the Catholic Church and the Canadian Council of Catholic Bishops for getting us to this point and this day, and also thank the Pope himself for his warm welcome here in the Vatican City.
Martha, did you want to offer a few reflections?
Hi, my name is Martha Gregg. I'm from northern Quebec, Couturac, northern Quebec. I'm also a former residential school survivor. And I'm very humbled and honored to have been chosen to be a delegate / health support. So it's very humbling. What I told the Pope is that there is need for people to heal, and there has to be a point of forgiveness from both parts, both parties. Because if you don't forgive, it eats at you, though you don't forget. There has to be a healing movement along with the people and the Catholic people, the churches. So that's something that is really needed, to work hand in hand so that our people can rise from all the hurts that's been done to them. So that is something that we working together and have respect for one another through love, and have a lot of faith prayers going towards this is something that I told him. And I also invited him to come to Canada, because I think it's very appropriate if he do come. It would mean more to the people, to the former residential school students and the families, because it's also the intergenerational that are affected by the residential school. So that's something that would be really meaningful for him to do an apology. So hopefully that will happen. But I was just more humbled to be chosen to attend this. So I will have a lot of sharing with my people when I get back home. Thank you.
Thank you. The meeting we had this morning was very, we use the word intimate. I think that might be a good word to use. It was a listening session, if you will. The point was a private encounter with the Holy Father, and the whole atmosphere was one of listening to what was said. And the Holy Father paid close attention to what President Obed addressed to him, as well as the various members of the delegation. We entered the room. He greeted each one personally at the door, like you would if someone was coming into your home, so to speak. And then we sat down in a semicircle, and we had a spiritual beginning. And then we had the various statements that were made. It was very calm. Sometimes an atmosphere of calmness and even silence can be very positive too, you know, and I think that there was that kind of attentiveness that was there. It was friendly and openness. And the Holy Father spoke a little bit to those who came. And so we had hoped when the delegation was organized, as you know, it goes back 3 years now, that this would be the tenor of the meeting, that it would be a listening time, an important step to other things, and also to, if you will, to establish a relationship in some way of engaging the Holy See in this great Canadian challenge and project of reconciliation in the country. And so the bishops were positive about it, what occurred, and very grateful for the graciousness and the honesty of the delegates who so respectfully but honestly stated what they felt was important to say. And the Holy Father appreciated that. So it was sincere, the meeting, very unique. One could not help but feel that one was in I guess you might call it even in a sort of a historical moment. So it was a great privilege to be part of that. And so it is a listening step that this whole encounter was this morning. So thank you.
Having had the privilege to be present both with the Métis and with the Inuit, I can say that there's a sense of gratitude for their openness to accept the invitation, that we've been working with them for so many years to provide these steps of reconciliation. As President Obed said, it is just but the beginning, but it was recognized as important because conversation, being able for the Holy Father to listen to the stories of those who survived residential schools, to parents who have been seeing their young often affected through what we've come to know that this trauma affects other generations. The youth delegate who was very, very moved, and she spoke with great respect, but also recognized that she was representing many of the young people from the North. When we did enter, and as Archbishop Gagnon mentioned, the Holy Father did greet each person, and he does that in a way that I think allows people to feel that he's welcoming them. Yes, in a library that is somewhat, in many ways, extraordinary. We wouldn't see it every day in our lives, but he was very warm and engaging. But the first delegate who lit the kulak, and that this flame was marking the beginning of this important encounter. And we were told, and the Holy Father understood, that this is an important symbol for the Inuit people when they gather. And so to have that expression, I think, was very important. It caused a bit of concern among some of the Vatican officials as to what was going to happen, but once Rhoda sort of explained how this would unfold and explained it very well, the flame kept lit during the whole meeting. It was a sense of warmth, as what was said. Light is very important, as we come to know in the Arctic. It's a sign of life, and I think that was symbolic of what was going to take place. Life for many people who have gone to residential schools has not been easy. They've been victims of both physical and sexual abuse. And these stories were told. And they were told with respect, but with a sense of knowing that the Holy Father needed to hear this. And he was gracious. He listened with intent and recognized, as we all have, that this is a travesty that has affected the church and affected our First Nations, our Métis and Inuit. I also want to say that there was a great sense of wanting the future of our children, as has been expressed, to be recognized in this path of reconciliation. We're not just doing this for now, we're doing it for generations to come. And this message kept coming through in the delegates, and especially the parents who were present. This delegation is something that I think the Holy Father wanted to happen. As we know, it was delayed in December, and so his desire to have this delegation return, I think, is a sign that we need to begin this process of reconciliation. The fact that the delegates rose and prayed in Inuktitut, the Our Father, you could see a sense in his own expression and being present in that moment of prayer that he felt at home, even though the language was something that was familiar to those who were part of the delegation. There was a sense of peace and calmness that came over the encounter as we began. I just maybe want to also express that the messages that President Obed has continued to bring forward in our discussions and in the planning is a sense of his commitment for his people, but also I think the openness that you've shown at all times to want to work with the church and to also recognize, as was expressed, that the church and the churches are important collaborators, important friends, hopefully, in this journey of reconciliation. And finally, I just want to also acknowledge that Martha, who was there as a healthcare worker, someone there to support them. Having gone through that pain and suffering, she had an ability to understand where these delegates were expressing to the Holy Father. And her summary, with all due respect, President Obed, was very much from the heart, recognized that this was an important moment, not only for her, but for the people that she represented. And so I thank you for those words that you expressed to the Holy Father. And as he said, if he comes to Canada, he sure doesn't want to come in the winter to the Arctic. But in some ways, he was jesting, because he does want to come, but he would like to come at a time when it's not as cold in Canada as it is in the winter. So he expressed that, and there was a lightheartedness at some times to the encounter as well, which made it very, very welcoming and friendly. So with that,
Thanks all of you for those reflections. Let's take a few questions. We'll follow the same path as before. Thanks, Erica, with the microphone. Please let us know which media organization you're representing and who you're directing your question to. Thank you.
Thank you for taking our questions. I'm Olivia Stefanovic from CBC News. I have a question for the bishops. I'd like to know, do you support this call from the leader of the Inuit delegation to have Pope Francis personally intervene in the case of Father Johannes Rivoire, to bring him to justice in Canada and to help extradite him? And what do you plan to do about that?
so I was present as President Obed made that request of the Holy Father. I think I would begin by saying that this particular situation, any situation of sexual abuse, the Church needs to take responsibility. And as we've heard, justice and truth are important in this path of reconciliation. So the truth that this individual, this priest, has committed these particular or alleged acts of abuse and is now living in France, President Obed has asked that the Church assist him, and also the Canadian government, to try and make sure that this act of justice can be realized in Canada. I do know that Bishop Krotke has also expressed his commitment on behalf of the Church and as the bishop up in Churchill, Manitoba, to also assist President Obed. Personally, the Holy Father, I think, heard that this is an important. We need to continue to state that the Church needs to address this in a forthright manner. And I also know that the Oblates have also reached out to President Obed, and he will have an opportunity to be meeting with them this week, and we'll be discussing issues related to this particular case as well. So I think these are concrete ways that we can support the request that Archbishop, or as President Obed made to Pope Francis, is to assist in this act of justice.
Next question. Yep, over here.
Wajeh Miigwech. I'm Cree from northern Quebec, and I'm here to cover this this historical event in my language for back home, and for our priests here. Maybe just the same question as the delegates. Is it only going to be that I don't know how to refer to him, priest, who is going to be extradited, hopefully, or is it going to be all of the priests? Because we do have a case in Quebec too as well, and it was only 10 years ago. We find out that that priest is somewhere else, stationed somewhere else, like they're just being moved around. So it's the same thing. We want justice too as well. So it's not I don't want to take your story away, but can we look at other cases too as well, and not just this one particular one? Again, no disrespect to you. You got
Perhaps I'll start by saying that the intervention that we made was for the Catholic Church to work with us in a global sense, in a larger sense, wherever there are accusations of sexual abuse or physical abuse, that the perpetrators be brought to Canada to face those charges. And this particular case is one that we have been trying to work on for decades, which is why we highlighted this particular case. But in no way did I intend, or ITK intend, to make it about one particular case when we know that there are other scenarios. The same principles apply to all that we are applying to this particular case. So I hope that that answers part of your question.
Bishop, go ahead.
No, I would follow up and agree with President Obed. This is just not one isolated case. And so I believe what I'm stating is that the Church wants to work with the relevant justice authorities, whether they be international or Canadian. And if there are allegations that someone has committed these abuse, that they need to be brought to justice, and the Church should not stand in the way, but assist those who have been victims to seek justice and healing. And this is but one way that the Church can continue to do that. And we need to be aware more of these particular cases so that we can be an instrument, not that we're standing in the way, but we need to be an instrument that is more effective in allowing these particular situations and individuals to be brought to justice.
Cindy.
Cindy Wooden from Catholic News Service. I saw in one of the interviews you did before coming that you acknowledged that not all the Inuit are supportive of this process or ready to engage in this process. Did you explain to the Pope, that how the reality in your community of, not everybody really thrilled yet with what the this engagement with the Church and not really ready for that step yet? And my second question is just a curiosity. Was there any kind of exchange of gifts? Thank you.
In relation to the first question, I brought it up in my remarks in the full spectrum of the Inuit collective. There are many Inuit who are Catholics, who are practicing Catholics. Many people have a strong faith, and that is a very positive influence in their communities. There are then also many who are still struggling to have any sort of relationship with the Catholic Church because of the trauma that they themselves have experienced or the trauma that their loved ones have experienced. We know through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we know through the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry, we know through the type of work that Martha has been doing at the community level. We hear these stories about where people are, and people are in such different places. So there is no one position that can be taken that will take into account all of the Inuit collective. But at the same time, we know that there are a number of people who have told their elected officials that these are the paths that we want to take, and then we bring these paths forward on behalf of Canadian Inuit. So we do our best, but we also recognize that there's a complexity to this conversation and a complexity around faith. No matter if it's Catholic, no matter if it's Anglican or whatever faith it might be, and colonialism and human rights abuses, that is unfortunately just a central tenet of the relationship that the Church has had with Indigenous peoples in Canada and with Inuit specifically. We are here pushing back against that, and we hear the Church talking about wanting to be on that path with us, and so that is encouraging. In relation to gifts, yes, there were a number of gifts that were given by the delegation to the Pope. I do hope that there are some photos shared of the Pope wearing his new stole, I think it's called, yes, that was made of sealskin and presented to him today. There was also a rosary case made of sealskin. There were 2 carvings that were provided to the Pope, and then some personal messages that were delivered to him as well. So the Pope was very thankful for these gifts. He interacted with those people who had presented to him. And then each of the delegates received a gift on the way out from the Pope directly. So there was an exchange of gifts, and I think people were very thankful for not only the Pope's interest in what he received, but also his token of appreciation to the delegates.
Right over here, Erica, thank you. Just about 4 rows up.
Good afternoon. I'm Mathieu Goyer with Radio Canada. My question is for Ms. Craig. You've mentioned the importance of forgiveness on both sides and how it is critical to move on. What would you like, what do you need to hear from the Pope, whether here or in Canada, in order for him to deserve your forgiveness as a residential school survivor?
Well, I was raised that it's very important to forgive whatever wrong has done to you. We always have to forgive them, though we won't forget. But not everybody is the same, and everybody is at different stages, and some of them are not at all ready to even want to hear forgiveness. But an apology to a lot of people, with my clients, have expressed that it would mean a lot. A genuine, heartfelt apology would be a first step to start wanting to start healing. So that is something that I personally, as a former residential school student, that would mean a lot to me myself, but more so for my fellow former students. And a lot of them have now passed away. So, but it's also their children that are affected as well. So it would mean more so important to them to move on. Because as when we were taken to school, there's parenting skills that we lacked in a lot of things that we had forgotten, not forgotten, but the lifestyle had changed. And we are now into big communities, whereas when we were taken away to residential school, we were raised by our parents. We were taught to be out on the land. And then when we got to the school, we learned how to be white person, which we cannot be. We are Inuit, we are First Nation, we are Métis. So that is something that we have to learn to live with one another. And also us be given the right to live our way, the way we want to live our life. And to have to be in respect with each other. So that is something, it's not that, what I'm trying to say is we have to work together on this. So an apology is the first step, then the forgiveness hopefully will follow through.
Thank you. Final word, President Obed, from you, if you'd like.
We really appreciate the opportunity, and we also appreciate that this story is being covered globally. This is a time for actions, and we have put some very clear actions forward to the Catholic Church and to the Canadian Council of Catholic Bishops, and we look forward to working in partnership with them to realize the actions that are necessary to bring reconciliation, to bring healing to communities, and to bring justice to those who have not had justice yet. we recognize that this is not just years in the making for this particular meeting, but this is an ongoing relationship between a global power in this particular place and 51 small communities in Inuit Nunangat and 65,000 Inuit in Canada. And we often, as Inuit, have felt powerless over time to sometimes correct the wrongs that have been done to us. We're incredibly resilient, and we are great at forgiving, as Martha has talked about. But we are still in search of the lasting respect and the right to self-determination and the acknowledgement of that right by institutions that have harmed us. And this is where we are in this moment, and we look forward to this new path. And we'll hold people accountable to the path that we say that we have a shared ambition to walk together on.
Bishop McGrattan, final thought.
Well, as President Obed said, we do need to find the way to walk together. And I think one of the most important things, as he's mentioned, is the respect and the acknowledgement of the identity of our Indigenous communities. And the fact that sometimes we realize that forces and powers and certain ways in which maybe aspects of colonialization have taken culture, family, and that has been affected for generations. And this truth is coming out, maybe in ways that some of us are still trying to understand, but by dialoguing and listening, as President Obed has said, I think we're better able to understand the truth, and from that truth, the path of reconciliation, and as Martha said, hopefully healing and forgiveness. But we have to begin those steps in order to have people realize that this is something that God wants, a real sense of forgiveness and reconciliation. So I thank President Obed and also Martha for being present. So thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers, President Obed, Martha Gregg, Archbishop Gagnon, and Bishop McGrattan. Thank you for being with us this afternoon and for sharing your time with us. Thank you to all the media who've joined us. I know that many of you still have requests or interest in speaking to either President Obed, individual delegates, or some of the bishops. And I know that there's contact information that we've shared with the media to be able to try to facilitate that as best we can. Patricia D'Souza is here in the front row, who's the communications representative from the ITK, and we'd be happy to work with any of you that would like to chat further. Thank you again for being here. Our next briefing will be on Thursday at 3 p.m., where we will have representatives from the First Nations delegation sharing their experiences from their meeting, which is Thursday morning. Friday, we will have a briefing at 3:30 p.m. with representatives from all the delegations, and that's following the meeting that takes place with the Holy Father, the public audience, on Friday at noon Rome time. Thank you again for being with us. Have a wonderful evening.